Hello, this is Patrick Ash, and welcome to Triathlon 101, How to Train. Today we're going to talk about how to ideally prepare for your next event, how to set up your training plan so it fits into your life rather than you trying to fit your life around a training plan. This is a third in our series of these presentations. In the first one back in November, we talked about what it takes, so some of the skills and habits necessary for being successful in endurance sport and triathlon. In December, we talked about goal setting, so how to develop the right habits and behaviors each day in order to lead you to be successful and ultimately get the results and performance you want. Today, we'll talk about how to train, how to fit it all in. So when we're thinking about developing a training plan, we're thinking about it in terms of fitting the training plan into our lives rather than trying to fit our lives around the training plan. Next month, we'll talk about all things swim, bike, and run. March, we'll talk about health versus fitness and how to make sure that you're training and preparing in a way that helps to improve your health as well as your fitness and ultimately your performance. In April, we'll talk about nutrition for training and events. And then May, as we lead into the season, we'll talk about event day planning. All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to talk about how to train. So setting up your ideal training plan. There are 6 key components that we'll discuss today. Number 1, how to prioritize your time available to prepare for your event. So looking at all those priorities that you have during your day and how that will impact your time to train and prepare. Second thing we'll talk about is selecting your goal event or events and how to prioritize those. The third thing we'll talk about is a 2-4-1 training plan design. So showing you a method of designing your training in order to help you prepare and balance the different events that we do, swim, bike, and run. Number 4, we'll talk about understanding effort. So specifically going into training zones, which will help you modulate or change your intensity based on the type of training you're doing. Number 5, we'll talk about how to make adjustments. So in those moments where maybe your body's not responding or you might be feeling a little ill or off, how to adjust your training in those circumstances. And then number 6, we'll talk about the 3 C's of executing a training plan. So these 3 C's were a nice way to bring everything together and show you how to get the most out of the training that you do. All right, number 1. This is a carryover from our last presentation on goal setting. And we're going to do this practice again because I think it's really important before you press that register button to understand what are some of the key components involved in making sure that you're picking the right distance based on the time you have available. And picking the right distance based on your available time is key to ensure that you're confident and ready and can enjoy the journey from start to finish. So one of the things we talked about last day was doing this time audit. So this is a way of looking at your available time to train, considering all your other life priorities. So this little table here is what I call a time audit table. So on the left-hand column here, we have all your non-negotiable daily time priorities. So things that you have to do each day that take up time. So for example, meals, work, family, sleep, social engagements or volunteer engagements, transport, and that creates a total. You may have more non-negotiable time priorities. You can always add those in. In the handout that goes along with this presentation, I've included a chart in there along with notes that go along with this presentation that you can use to fill out your own charts and add your own notes to this presentation. So it's important to pull that out and make sure that you have that available. And then I've broken this up to Monday to Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And for me, the reason I did it that way is because Monday and Friday are pretty similar each day based on my time responsibilities and my commitments. Saturday and Sunday, again, fairly similar. So I've just brought those categories together. in the chart that I give you in the handout, I've actually separated each day on its own. So picking the right distance or right event distance for you really comes down to understanding your daily time available to train. So again, considering all those things that you have to commit to each day, your work, your family time, social, meals, volunteer activities, all those things. Once you're clear on your available time to train, then the next question to ask yourself is, what is your 10 out of 10 schedule? So when you consider your available time to train and then you plot out what you can do for training each day, if you look at your entire week, can you say to yourself with 10 out of 10 confidence, 100% confidence that you can complete that schedule? If the answer is yes, then that's the schedule. That's where you need to start. If it's anything lower than that, it's time to make an adjustment. The other thing to consider is, does your family support your goals? Because if your family doesn't support your goals, this time commitment that you're going to make away from them, it's going to be difficult to follow through on a consistent basis with your schedule, your training schedule. So it's important to have their support. So it's important to have that discussion to help them understand what the commitment is going to be for you, how often you're going to be away, so they understand and can support you. The last thing about your schedule and developing it is what you're doing right now for training is where you want to start. So for example, I train 8 hours a week. So I don't want to start at a level any higher than that. I'd rather start right where I am. So if I'm normally training 8 hours a week in my calendar, that's where I'm going to begin, or even a little bit less than that. But you don't want to start more because that's going to take you to a place outside of your 10 out of 10 schedule. If you know you can confidently do 8 hours, start with 8 hours. Then you can always build in more time later. Now, going back to this time audit, this is where you can bring out the chart and start to fill in your own time audit. But on the left, again, left column, we have all our non-negotiable priorities. So I've put in my time commitments in hours here. So meals, 2 hours a day, work 8 hours a day, family time 3 hours a day, sleep 7.5, social commitments about 1 hour a day, transport about 30 minutes a day, and then a total is 22 hours. So that leaves me with another 2 hours that is possible available time to train. Then Saturday and Sunday, I did that same breakdown in hours of all the different commitments, and I came up with 20.5. So that leaves me with 3.5 hours on Saturday and Sunday. So I have a total of 17 hours per week that I can train. So that gives me some flexibility to know, okay, if I need to up my training time, I'm currently doing 8 hours, I've got some room to work in some more time in there. Now, obviously, because I have 17 hours, that's not where I want to start. I want to start where I'm at. I'll start at 8 and then slowly start to progress up based on the event that I'm preparing for. And we'll talk about preparation times for different distances of events in a second. The other thing to consider is you want to make sure that you include that travel time from your house or workplace to a venue. So if you're doing swimming, you need to go to a swimming venue, you got to consider that time, that travel time going to and from those places as well, including that in your training time. Right, so once we've done the time audit, we want to make sure we give ourselves a comfortable amount of time to prepare for the event based on our available time to train. So we take our available time to train, and then we start considering what events would work or fit into our available time to train. So this is an example of running events. So on the left column here, we have the event distance. So we have the different traditional running distance events here on the left side. In the middle column, we have preparation time in months. So you see as the distance of the event gets longer, obviously the preparation time gets longer. And then in the third column on the right here, we have training time in hours per week. So averaging, for 5K, it's 3 to 5 hours a week. And then for a marathon, might be 6 to 10 hours, for example. Now, this time will vary based on your previous athletic history. So if you have a strong athletic history, you might need less time to train versus someone who doesn't have an athletic history, your current fitness and volume of training, and how far you are from the goal event. Now, if we look at triathlon, for example, same thing here on the left-hand column. We have the event distances. In the middle column, preparation time in months, and then training time in hours per week. So as the distance gets longer, preparation time in months gets longer, training time in hours per week gets longer. Again, this will vary based on your athletic history, current fitness or volume of training, and how far you are from your goal event. So that gives you a good sense of what the preparation time is required, and then take your time audit that you did that highlights your available time to train, and then you can more accurately select an event that fits in with your available time to prepare for it. Once you've selected your goal events, it's good to prioritize these. Now, obviously, if you only have one event for the year, that's going to be your number one priority, or what I term your A race. Now, if you've chosen multiple events, it's good to prioritize those events because that will affect how you train and how those events fit into your training plan. So typically your number one priority event is what we term your A race. This is the event that you're gearing up for the most. That's the most important for you to do well at, and the one that you want the best result at. Then other races you might have in your calendar are termed B races. So these are events that have a secondary priority. These are events you'll typically use to prepare for that A event or that number one priority. They're typically equal or shorter distance than your goal A race event. That way they fit into your preparation for that A event within your training plan. Then you'll have C races. So C races are what I call train through races. So these are shorter events that you can pop into your training calendar as almost like catered training days. Smaller events that allow you to get into that event setting, practice your pacing. You make them part of your training plan. You don't necessarily like taper down to them or anything. They're just in there, and they're typically short enough that they don't require a lot of recovery time, so you can settle back into your normal training routine shortly after those events. So that's how you would categorize your events based on the priority to you, A, B, and C. So we've figured out our available training time. We've categorized our events. Now let's start to put our training plan together. And one of the simplest ways to put a training plan together for triathlon is using a 2-4-1 design. And how this works is 2 stands for 2 swims, 2 runs, 2 bikes, 2 runs per week. So each discipline you're doing twice per week, and how those 2 sessions break up is 1 session is a long endurance session, meaning this is the work you're doing at a lower intensity level where you can have a conversation with someone beside you. It's easy to moderate effort. It's comfortable through the entire length of the session. These are longer in that they help to build your endurance, your aerobic endurance, so strengthening your heart and lungs to help deliver oxygen to your working muscles at those lower heart rates, making you more efficient at lower intensities. Then your second session in each of those is a short interval session. This is where we're working more closer to the top or higher end of your fitness level. So doing intervals where they're short, hard efforts. This is where it's tough to talk. And again, we're working that higher end of your fitness range. So what we do by working those 2 ranges is you build a really strong aerobic engine at those lower intensities. Then you build a stronger higher end, and now the range of your fitness becomes a lot better. So when you have those changes in efforts during an event, your body's prepared for every range spectrum that you can give it. Number 4 relates to strength sessions per week or strength and mobility sessions. So I like, as a coach, to emphasize strength and mobility. And the reason is because strength and mobility is going to strongly support your endurance activities by creating resiliency in your tissues and joints. So your muscles and your joints become more resilient and stronger and able to deal with the stresses that you put on it through these swim, bike, and run repetitive activities. How these are structured are they're short, so 20 to 30 minutes. They have a warm-up, some range of motion, balance, and stability activities to activate the body. Then those 4 strength sessions are broken up into 4 different focuses per session. So the first session has a focus of pressing activities. So anything where you're pressing resistance away from your body, like a push-up or a chest press, for example. Second session is a squat, lunge, or jump. So we're working on loading the lower half of the body from a squatting, lunging, and jumping position. The third session is a hip hinge or pull. So we're working, again, the posterior chain or back of the body a little bit more. With the pull, we're working the upper body and, again, the back of the body with those exercises. Then the fourth session is a little bit more dynamic, where we're dragging or pulling something towards the body while we're moving. We'll be throwing something like a medicine ball or slamming it down. So working more of dynamic types of motions, more explosive on that 4th day. And then the 1 stands for your 1 recovery day per week. So giving yourself a good 24 hours of full recovery between your sessions. So this is how it would break down on a week. So 2-4-1. So on this particular schedule, you have 10 being Monday, 11 Tuesday, 12 Wednesday, and so on. So 1 would be your recovery day. Tuesday, this is where you put your pressing focus strength session. So that 20 minutes, you could piece it with the interval ride. So use it as a warm up to the interval ride and then hop on the bike afterwards, do your interval ride. Then we take the load off the legs, jump in the pool on Wednesday for aerobic swim. And then Thursday, we go back to loading the legs again with a squat focus and interval run. And then Friday again, take the load off the legs with a swim. And then Saturday, we do your hinge pull focus, hop on the bike for a longer endurance ride. Then we could do a run off the bike, just a short one, but again, to condition those muscles for that transition between biking and running. And then Sunday, then we have our drag, throw, slam strength activation that we do prior to our long run. And that's a nice balanced week of training. And then what this does is, if we complete this on Sunday, we've got pretty close to 36 or even maybe 48 hours with the recovery day on Monday before we start training again on Tuesday. So that gives us some nice recovery time between. And the times here relate to a sprint distance type of training session. So just keep that in mind. That's why the times are the way they are. So that leaves us with a total duration of 5 hours, 20 minutes for the week. Now, there's some variations you can do in that 2-4-1 training design. For example, if you have time, you can add another session per week in one of your weakest disciplines or the one you want to improve the most. So for example, you may want to improve your swimming a little bit more. So maybe you add another swim session, or you're working on developing your bike or run strength. So you might add another bike or run session depending on what you want to improve the most. If you're feeling flat or tired on consecutive days, that's a red flag that you want to pay attention to. So one of the things you can do to allow your body to adjust to that, but still keep training and gather benefits, is to make the rest of your sessions that week easy endurance efforts. So just that conversational pace where you're able to talk to someone. Even though it's lower intensity and maybe you might be switching out an interval session for an easier endurance session while you recover, you'll still be making progress. You're still making deposits into your fitness bank by continuing to train. So don't feel guilty about it. Allow yourself to recover, and you'll be more consistent in the long run. And the other thing is, prioritize adding training time in the form of endurance work rather than intervals first. So if you're going to add training time, it's better to add it in the form of an endurance session. So that, again, that conversational effort, rather than doing it as high intensity intervals, because those take longer to recover from and can impact the following sessions. So understanding effort, one of the things that's really important is when you're training is to understand what effort you should be training at and what that should feel like. So typically we use a 5-zone model. There's lots of different zones that you can use. There's a 3-zone model, 5-zone, which I'll explain here. There's a 7-zone, there's a 9-zone. There's lots of different variations on it. I'm going to explain the 5-zone. It's the one I use most in my coaching practice. I find it the easiest and best to differentiate between the different effort levels. So how this works is zones 1 and 2 are easy and moderate. So zone 1, easy, what that will feel like is it's very comfortable to talk at the effort level. So if somebody was beside you, you could easily carry on a conversation. This is more about just moving the body, loosening up, and active recovery. Zone 2 is more of a moderate effort. This is when we're doing a lot of our aerobic conditioning for our long endurance type of training sessions. This is where you can talk in broken sentences. It's a comfortable effort for the duration of the session. That's really important. A moderate effort should be comfortable for the duration of the session. You should be able to eat and drink comfortably at this effort. Then we move into zones 3, 4, and 5, which are more of our interval type of work. So zone 3 is what we call moderate, hard, or tempo. So this is where you're working hard enough that you could say words to someone beside you, but you're not carrying on sentences. The interval length here is 10 to about 60 minutes in length. And this is where we're developing our fitness level, our strength and resilience in our body to hold a pace that's right around our threshold effort. And threshold, for example, would be like a 3 or 5K pace or best effort in a run, or 30 minutes to an hour best effort on a bike would be like a threshold type of effort. So zone 4 would be hard threshold. So that's if we're doing an all-out 5K, for example, in a run, or maybe we're doing a 30-minute or an hour best effort type of bike ride. That would be an example of that type of hard threshold work, or maybe even a 1,500-meter swim would be another one where it's best effort. So when you're working at this effort, breathing is heavy, it's difficult to talk. Most intervals that you do conditioning in this zone is 5 to 20 minutes in length in most cases. And then our last set we do is zone 5. And this is what we term as fast, sprints, or strides. So it's all about doing fast efforts with great technique and form. You're really focused on the effort and just making sure that you're holding good technique and form while moving fast. These are short intervals, 30 seconds or less. So those are the zones and what the efforts that correspond to those zones. Now the next 2 columns to our right here, heart rate as percent of threshold and pace watts as percent of threshold, gives you an idea if you're following heart rate or if you're following pace for running or watts on the bike for power. Gives you a percentage of your threshold power or threshold heart rate or threshold pace that you should be holding in each of those zones. So as you can see in zone 1, you'd be doing 67% or less of your threshold heart rate, 54% or less of your pace or threshold watts. That's an example. And you see the percentages move up as you move up into the zones as percent of threshold. So the effort gets harder, heart rate gets higher, pace and watts gets higher as the zone moves up in number. So that gives you an idea. This is based off of the work of Dr. Steven Seiler, who you can look up. He does a lot of work on training zones and aerobic development and training. So this model is a polarized model. So specifically speaking, that 80% of your training is generally in most endurance preparation programs will be in zones 1 and 2. And then the other zones 3, 4, and 5, 20% of your training will be there. Because it's more intense, it takes longer to recover from. That's why you do less percent of your training volume in those zones. So there's your zone models and the effort that relate to it. Why I emphasize effort so much is because it's intuitive. If you can really get a good sense of how an effort should feel at each zone and really dial that in, that's going to serve you really, really well. More so than knowing what your power and pace is or what your heart rate is at those zones. Why? Because your data that you get from your watch or your heart rate strap or your power meter can be inaccurate at times, or sometimes it can completely fail. So if you're in an event and all you're relying on is the power pace on your computer or the heart rate on your watch, and that fails, then you'll be left wondering what to do, how to keep going, what effort you should be running at. Whereas if you understand your effort first and prioritize that effort with what zone it should be and how that relates to your power and pace, you'll always have a guide with you to understand how hard you should be working at any given moment. So understand effort first and support it with the tools of power, pace, and heart rate to make your training as intentional and effective as possible. How to make adjustments. Now, one of the things that's really important is how to make adjustments to your training plan. And you want to avoid these certain mistakes as well, which I'll mention within. So the 3 types of adjustments we want to recognize and address here is the test drive method, cramming, and spacing of your sessions. So test drive method, this is what you do when you want to make adjustments to your program. So say you're feeling off, just not feeling great leading into a session. How do you know when to adjust your session? Well, you can implement the test drive method. So what you do is you complete your warm-up in the first 5 minutes of the main set. Then ask yourself, how do you feel? And typically there'll be 3 scenarios that you run up into. The first one is you feel the same, still the same low energy. What you should do then in that circumstance is complete a very easy recovery and or mobility session. So easy meaning, again, zone 1, it's very conversational, just active recovery, just moving the body. If you're using heart rate, you could use resting heart rate plus 50 beats. So if your resting heart rate is 60, you add 50 beats to that, maximum you can go is 110 beats per minute. The second scenario is after completing the warm-up in the first 5 minutes of the main set, you feel better. You're like, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel good. Then just do the session as prescribed. Your body is ready to absorb that load. Now, the third scenario is if you feel worse, you need to stop and take the day off or only do mobility only. Your body's telling you it's not ready to do the intensity you're asking it to do. Listen to it, adjust, and you'll feel better the next day. Now, using this test drive method in the case of maybe you're feeling some symptoms like you're stuffed up, your nose is running, sore throat, you're feeling achy, those type of things. Especially with COVID, we need to be a little more careful with those things now. So one of the things you want to focus on if you feel those symptoms is increase your water intake, focus on quality nutrition, non-processed food, avoid added sugars. Then take the day off, or if you feel like training, keep the effort zone 1. So very, very easy. Use that heart rate guideline. So resting heart rate plus 50 beats maximum. And then you can do or just do a mobility session. Now, if your symptoms gets worse, then you need to discontinue your training, immediately consult with your coach and healthcare professional to make sure that if something needs to be dealt with, you deal with that and your health comes first. Once you're symptom-free for 2 consecutive days, you can resume normal training. Now, I see this mistake all the time, that athletes start to feel guilty. They don't want to miss training, or maybe they feel, I'm okay, I'll just train through this sore throat or whatever. Without a doubt, every time this does 2 things. One is it prolongs your recovery time. And the second thing is it prolongs the time you do low quality sessions, because you're dealing with the symptoms, your immune system's depressed, and you can't give the best quality possible. So it's always better to take a few days in the beginning, allow your body to recover, then resume normal training. Or you can try to train through it, and then you'll have to take 2 weeks later or more because you've stressed your immune system and now the symptoms have gotten worse. Number 2, avoid cramming. So one of the things you want to do is, if you miss a session on a particular day, do not add it to next day's training. This will typically lead to excess fatigue and impact the quality of future sessions. Training plans are designed with a specific load and intensity requirement on each day. So if you take a session from a previous day and add it to the existing, that's going to increase the fatigue ratio and decrease the quality of future sessions. Just treat each day as a clean slate. Do what's in the plan for that day and move forward. Number 3, spacing matters. Specifically with running, if you're running longer than 30 minutes and with some interval or any intensity, you want to spread those run sessions at least 48 hours apart, so you're not loading the body with running intensity so close together. The reason being is running usually adds 2 to 4 times your body weight stress on each stride. So you want to limit that by spacing those run sessions out. At least 48 hours apart is more ideal for sure. As I mentioned before, strength sessions can be done immediately pre or post training for time efficiency. So you can make a strength session and a bike, or a strength session and a run, essentially one session. So you use that strength session as a warm-up, or you could do it post-session as well. The one thing about resistance training, remember, it's a complement to the swim, bike, and run training you're doing. So make sure that you're not lifting too heavy so that you're too sore, and that will negatively impact your training. Make sure that you're choosing a resistance, a weight that allows you to transition into your swim, bike, run sessions so that you can still have high quality. Lastly, you want to split bike and run interval sessions a minimum of 48 hours apart from each other to help with recovery. Because you're loading the lower limbs, both on a bike and run session, specifically with interval sessions, if you spread them out 48 hours, that will allow you to better support your recovery and quality of those sessions. Lastly, the 3 C's of preparation: confidence through purposeful practice. So in each practice, I suggest you just focus on one thing to do better. That will make your practice purposeful. So for example, maybe just working on your breathing and swimming, maybe on a section of your pedal stroke during your ride, your posture during your run, your form during a squat in a strength session, for example. Number 2, consistency over time. Consistency is king. The more consistent you are in your training, making those adaptations we talked about, the more consistent you are, the better prepared you are going to be for your event, the more your fitness will improve, and the more you'll be able to consistently develop your skill over time. And that will lead to being competent when it matters most during your event. Building that purposeful training done over time will build the confidence and competency to show up to your event ready to have a great day and enjoy the journey. So 6 takeaways: prioritize your time to prepare. So doing that time audit and then selecting events based on the actual time you have to train. Then prioritizing your goal events, A, B, and C within your calendar. Thirdly, 2-4-1 training plan design. So 2 sessions per swim, bike, run each week, 4 strength sessions and 1 recovery day. Understanding effort in your training zones. So effort is always on the top, and using power and pace and heart rate to complement those in each of the 5 zones that we discussed. How to make adjustments, so when you're fatigued, when you have symptoms of illness, and then when you're also missing sessions, how to adjust and spacing your sessions out. And then our 3 C's of a training plan. So confidence through purposeful practice, consistency over time, and then building that competency through that purposeful practice will allow you to show up to events feeling ready and prepared and able to enjoy the journey. So thank you so much. If you need some help, you can contact me at patrick@endurancejourney.com, Endurance Journey on Instagram and Facebook, or check out our website. We have all of our coaching plans, training plans, programs, and group training programs available. We're taking on new athletes as we speak. We have a few spots available in our signature coaching program. So come check us out. Thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to seeing you in February for our swim, bike, and run presentation. Thank you.